journalist Gustavo Ribeiro joins us from the Brazilian capital, Brasilia. Gustavo, thank you so much for your time. When I read this, I thought, how is this possible?
Well, the government has put in place a 600 reais, which amounts to $110 stipend, which is for a limited amount of months to help people in offsetting the economic effects of the pandemic. And while it doesn't seem much, it is more money than millions of Brazilians have ever seen in their lives in a full month. It has accounted for 97% of the revenue of the poorest 10% of Brazilians. So that explains why Brazilians are rallying around Bolsonaro, because they identify him as the responsible for that extra income that is saving millions of people from extreme poverty. Even if, and this is interesting, his administration was against that stipend, and it was Congress that has put it in place. But the government has very skillfully worked this communication into convincing people that the president was the person responsible for that extra income.
So if it's the lower income population that is in support of obviously receiving extra money, who are the people who a couple of months ago were regularly banging their pots and pans together, calling for Bolsonaro to resign? Were they more middle-class housewives and people who don't have the same daily struggles as the lower income population?
Well, a big part of those window protests were from upper middle class people. It's important to say that while those protests were happen in many states and many cities, they are more nuclear than a widespread sentiment. And this emergency aid has, for instance, helped Bolsonaro increase his popularity in areas and with demographics that have resisted to supporting him in the past, like the Northeast, which is the second most populated region in Brazil and the poorest one in the country, and among less educated and lower income voters. He is, however, losing some support among the business class, which was overwhelmingly pro-Bolsonaro just a year and a half ago.
There was a former health minister who resigned in protest at Bolsonaro's attitude and direction that he was taking the country in during the worst of the coronavirus pandemic. And he has said that Bolsonaro is destroying the country. I mean, has he changed his attitude in terms of having previously been out and about without a mask, telling people to go to work, to have barbecues, to go out to restaurants? Has he changed his attitude at all? Or is he still exactly the same, basically saying to people, and he literally pretty much said this, to paraphrase, lots of people are going to die, get used to it?
No, he hasn't changed his stance. Bolsonaro has been quite consistent in his approach to the coronavirus. And what is interesting is that the same poll you mentioned that shows a bump in support also shows that respect for social isolation guidelines is much lower in people that trust the government as opposed to those who don't trust the government. Bolsonaro has used his own coronavirus infection as a way to prove his argument and say, nothing happened to me because I was right in saying that the coronavirus is not that big of a deal. It's, in his words, like catching rain. It will be very severe for some few folks, but most people will just weather it off. And many people do believe the president.
Gustavo, thanks for coming on to the program. Really interesting to hear what's happening in Brazil. Gustavo Ribeiro from Brasilia.